For it. My name is Maeve O'Rourke. I am joined here with Scott Glaza at the 2023 Vancouver Regional Championships. 10 years ago, Scott, you started casting your first World Championships in Vancouver. You had played in Worlds the year prior in Hawaii. I brought a little friend for you for some moral support. You ran Polytoad, a great weather setter. It has been pretty rainy here in Vancouver today. It's going to be pretty rainy this weekend, but you know, I wanted to kind of bring back that history a little bit, especially with our first matchup here.
Yeah, it was a little less rainy in Hawaii for the 2012 World Championships, but Polytoad's going to feel right at home here. You know, we don't see quite as much rain on the field as we used to, though, you know, with Polytoad's drizzle buddy, Pelipper, we'll definitely see a bit of it over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, Polytoad and Ludicolo are currently hanging out in Pokemon Home, so, you know, maybe with those DLCs, we'll see what ends up coming up, but I'm Shreyas, Conchi, Radhakrishna.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to note, these players started their Pokemon careers at a very similar place where they were on the opposite sides of the regional championship bracket in the 2011 senior division. No. Yeah, they some interesting history. It's always fun, I guess, when players have been competing for that long and then somehow wind up against each other again. So in a different country so far in the future. Really enjoying the legacy of the game this year, where it seems like so many people have decided to come back. Yeah,
I mean, it shows the legacy of both of these trainers too, right? They've been playing for a very long time, and they are still playing. I think you said Shreyas took a little bit of a break there, but even for Gavin to still be playing at such consistent levels there. But let's take a look at their teams. And you and I spoke a little bit about them. We think Gavin's team, it's not the Oceania team, but it's still pretty interesting.
Yeah, I really love it. I kind of am fascinated by the choice for Gavin to switch teams, because I don't think anyone was like super surprised by what he brought in Oceania. So I think he had the option of keeping the same team, but I like what he has a lot. He's got a ton of options. He can function in or outside of Trick Room, which is going to be very powerful in this matchup. I think the Volcarona is a really cool Pokemon, where just kind of something you have to consider. There's a lot of Pokemon on this team that you kind of wouldn't perhaps expect to be paired with Volcarona, but if you focus too hard on kind of like the natural synergies the other Pokemon have, Volcarona can easily get carried away and just sweep.
Yeah, I think the Volcarona is a really interesting one. The Azumarill is a Pokemon that we don't see very often, but I do like the choice of it, right? It seems like Gavin has been very driven to pick some pretty strong water types, seeing that Pelipper is still on the team where it was in Oceania, also was paired with that Palafin. No Palafin this time. However, Shreyas, they are running pretty much what we call that Psy spam, in that Indeedee and Armarouge being able to set up some Psychic terrain, also a couple different options for Trick Room. But Gavin has a lot of really cool tools on his team, and one of them being Ice Spinner on that Azumarill, and then even something like Taunt on that Mimikyu as well, which can help shut down a couple of big threats on the opposite side.
Yeah, I learned in the pre-show that Psy Spam is the strongest team in the format, and there are no counters, but Gavin's team sheet does bring that a little bit into question. I think he has a lot of really interesting options for this matchup. I think it's just a really difficult team preview for Shreyas, where I think Gavin is threatening so many different looks, where he could just kind of play Trick Room straight and have a reasonably even matchup. He has the ability to turn off terrains entirely. He has a Pokemon in Volcarona with Quiver Dance, where he can kind of get carried away, and if Trick Room is not set up, kind of just win that way. I think he just has a lot of tools. And then the Wide Guard on Pelipper, I think, is definitely the most devastating part of this team preview.
Yeah.
It's just tricky to deal with, right? Where whether or not he brings it, you have to consider that on Shreyas' side, where I think either Azumarill or Pelipper could really just mess with certain combinations of Pokemon that Shreyas would otherwise like to bring. So he's got to guess a lot more accurately than Gavin does here, who I think has like a number of options that could all lead to a dub.
Yeah, I mean, even that Indeedee, right, its only attacking move is Dazzling Gleam. So if you put a Wide Guard in front of it, the only thing it can do is maybe it has Follow Me, Imprison, and Trick Room as its other moves, right? So you can click Follow Me, maybe, it's not, but you're not able to get any damage output. So even if Gavin says, my end game here is to just get it so that it's one-on-one with Pelipper and Indeedee, which is a weird end game to try and force yourself to, but either way, here is turn one. It is Pelipper and Brute Bonnet for Gavin, Iron Hands, and Amoonguss here for Shreyas.
Yeah, I think the new and improved Brute Bonnet, the original Amoonguss here, is going to like that part of this matchup. It is threatening that Pollen Puff, but neither side opting for the Trick Room options. I do think that could go either way here, but perhaps going to see an early terrestrialization from Shreyas.
Yeah, I think something that's really interesting is Shreyas seeing that early terrestrialization. They have multiple grass terrestrializations on this team, which is definitely something to kind of shut out this Brute Bonnet, which is carrying Spore. It doesn't have any sort of Sucker Punch, any sort of Pollen Puff on there, so it's not going to be able to do that super effective damage. Pelipper, though, just going to take it safe here, just going to protect this turn. Brute Bonnet also going for protect. Looks like they are just trying to stop that fake out from the Iron Hands on the opposite side of the field. Iron Hands went right for a Wild Charge, though, into the Pelipper for that super effective damage. No terrestrialization this turn either. Amoonguss just pollen puffing, trying to get that damage off onto the Pelipper as well, especially if you can break a Focus Sash.
Yeah, nice safe move by Shreyas. I really like seeing that terrestrialization get canceled in the end there, where it's such a likely play on Gavin's side that he's going to double protect to avoid the fake out. Is that you don't want to commit that terrestrialization and then get nothing out of it. Whether or not he decides to go for it for real now or not, at least Gavin actually has to react now, make some defensive switches perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like a terrestrialization, though, will be coming out this turn, like we mentioned on that last one, will be this Pelipper, though, here for Gavin. It is going to be terrestrializing into just the flying type. This removes that 4-time super effective weakness to that Wild Charge. Does at least help, I think, as well, maybe with trying to not take a couple of big, strong attacks here. Looks like Shreyas also just going to match that terrestrialization here on turn 2. Kind of coming out swinging here with these techs being brought. And it is that grass terrestrialization on the Iron Hands. You do not want to get spored or rage powdered, especially if you can do that super effective damage onto the Pelipper on the opposite side of the field. Pelipper goes first, though, with the Hurricane. This is going to do huge damage onto either one of these Pokemon. Into the Amoonguss, it is enough for a one-hit knockout, so you've already gotten rid of that huge threat off of the field. If you're Gavin, you no longer have to worry about getting put to sleep. Brute Bonnet goes for the Spore, not going to happen thanks to that terrestrialization, so a nice call there, but Wild Charge from this Iron Hands into the Pelipper. It does bring it down to its Focus Sash.
Yeah, it's a pretty good turn by both sides there. I don't think you're hugely upset on Gavin's side of the field if you get a free knockout on a troublesome Pokemon like Amoonguss, but he comes at a cost that we know that Pelipper is very important for the matchup, threatening that wide guard, so at least getting down to Focus Sash. And we're seeing why we see that item now, often in, I guess, what is now Regulation A.
Yes.
We are seeing Damp Rock because the Pelipper wasn't threatened so much, but it's just so difficult to get away with it. And there's so many Pokemon, particularly this Iron Hands, who can easily threaten damage on it. And we do see that Indeedee, who we mentioned, potentially cannot do a whole lot against the Pelipper, although, with a single hit point remaining and that terrestrialization active, you're going to assume that Gavin's going to want to get a little more out of it than just clicking wide guard.
Yeah, Gavin cannot get rid of the Psychic Terrain on this turn. He does not have the Azumarill in at this point, so it cannot click Ice Spinner. Indeedee could go for a Trick Room, help out whatever Pokemon's in the back, and maybe try and force a knockout since that Pelipper is the fastest thing on the field. It hasn't clicked Tailwind of any sort, so they definitely are pretty mindful. Gavin is going to switch out the Pelipper this turn, though, is going to bring in Mimikyu. Mimikyu does have the opportunity to maybe reset Trick Room if you want, but it also can function very well in Trick Room. Follow me instead here from this Indeedee. Going to take all of the attention away from its partner Pokemon. Will get put to sleep this turn. Not going to be able to set up any Trick Room here, but it is now threatened by some pretty super effective damage, I think, as long as you can get rid with that Shadow Claw. But Rock Slide here into both of these Pokemon. Mimikyu's disguise will break, and now it's a little bit more threatened.
Yeah, Mimikyu, we're going to have to see what it does here. Mimikyu's pretty interesting. Gavin using a pretty supportive looking set here with both Will-O-Wisp, Taunt,
yes,
as well as Trick Room. So, not likely to click the Trick Room in this situation with the quicker Pokemon inside the field, but it's threatening and burn. We saw the Iron Hands cleverly terrestrialize to avoid the Spore. Can't do the same for the burn, has to get off the field.
Yeah, Armarouge will switch in here, at least not loving the rain at the moment, but Will-O-Wisp from this Mimikyu into the Flash Fire will boost that Fire-type move power. Spore from the Brute Bonnet, though, into that Armarouge. That Armarouge was not able to terrestrialize into the Grass typing because that went into the Iron Hand, so Armarouge will take a little bit of sleep here, as will Indeedee at this point.
Yeah, I really like that move from Gavin. So, he's not really with any way to threaten a bunch of damage on the Iron Hands, so it's kind of just a nice check, right? Like, the Pokemon that slot is going to get a status effect that is very beneficial to me. Either you have to take the burn or you switch and take the Spore, which I think is probably a lot worse here. On the flip side, we do see Shreyas kind of like cleverly getting the two Pokemon out in the field together, but they're both asleep, so it's going to be tough to do too much with that, and now the Azumarill does come in.
Yeah, and Azumarill does now have the opportunity to click something like that Ice Spinner. Indeedee does take another turn of sleep. Armarouge takes its first turn of sleep here as well, meaning right now that I think Gavin has a turn to maybe go for something, but goes for his own Trick Room here instead. Does have, maybe has a plan here. Maybe he was trying to predict another Trick Room in its stead.
Yeah, sort of a strange spot. I guess beneficially for Gavin. He's at least got the Azumarill out here. I think that it's going to be tough for either of the Pokemon on Shreyas' side to deal with it too quickly. That Azumarill is holding the Choice Band item, so one swing with whatever it is would do a lot of damage. But Mimikyu having to get out here, now the quickest Pokemon in the field, most likely. So a bit of an awkward spot that Gavin finds himself in, with either of these Pokemon potentially being able to wake up on this turn.
Yeah, I mean, something that's interesting, right, is the only Dark-type attack this Brute Bonnet has is Sucker Punch, and you can't use that right now with the terrain, and Liquidation will be the move that's locked into here for that Azumarill. It is enough to knock out the Armarouge pretty quickly here, getting rid of that big threat. Indeedee not able to do a whole lot at the moment. It will be up next turn, right? So that'll at bare minimum. So Iron Hands can switch in here. Is not going to take any super effective damage, but if you're Gavin, you may want to switch that back in.
Yeah, I mean, so it's also we're getting close to the point where Gavin kind of is checkmate here, right? Where we have the sleeping Indeedee. All Gavin really needs to do to get out of this game is knock out the Indeedee, let Trick Room expire, and send that 1 HP Pelipper back out to finish things up.
Yeah, Azumarill here going for another Liquidation is going to take a Wild Charge. It is not enough to knock it out here, so that's something I definitely think Gavin would have trained that Pokemon to handle. Brute Bonnet with Seed Bomb into the Indeedee, easily enough to get it with that last bit of HP, meaning that it is currently Iron Hands against the World, and the World is a Pelipper that can come in and move faster than it.
Yeah, I mean, the good news for it is, if it can somehow find a way to knock out all of Pelipper's friends in just a couple of turns here, perhaps it can knock out the Pelipper, but things looking real bad for Iron Hands.
Yeah, Sucker Punch now able to go off. Terrain ended at just the right time there. Liquidation also going into the Iron Hands, not very effective. Rock Slide coming back here. No critical hit onto that Brute Bonnet. Is a critical hit with that probably last bit of HP there on the Azumarill. Will force this Pelipper in. Pelipper can, in fact, go and get the Rain Up and then just click Hurricane. It is faster. You don't have any threat of Fake Out. So this is a pretty comfy game one here for Gavin.
Yeah, I mean, there's still, some need to stall here. I believe we still have Trick Room up, right? But I guess even if we don't, it just doesn't really matter. I just don't know how you get enough damage out if you're on Shreyas' side of the field to actually get in a winning position.
Yeah, Sucker Punch is priority. Will easily knock that Iron Hands out here. So that means at this point, Gavin has taken that first game incredibly well piloted. I think it is definitely showing the answers that he has for Trick Room, even if he doesn't have to, even if he can click Trick Room himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gavin's trainer name of pretty accurately depicting this matchup for Shreyas' side of the field. It's a tough one, right? Where I think Gavin had a number of options he could show. I actually kind of really like the way both players played Team Preview to an extent, where they kind of had Gavin had some of his interesting solutions to Shreyas' team hidden in the back so that he could preserve them. The early Pelipper doing all that damage, then hiding so it can come out and checkmate the game later. It wound up he had such a big advantage he didn't even need to, but I kind of like that. And then I think on Shreyas' end too, it likely would not have gone well had he tried to lead the Psy Spam duo. So at least sort of clever to try to maneuver with it in the back, but it didn't end up mattering too much. And this is a really tough situation to be in Shreyas. He knows to win twice in a row after getting a little bit crushed in the first game, and I think that sometimes you get a lot of information. It's a learning game, but I think even considering that, Gavin doesn't have to do the same thing he did in game one.
No, and I think that's a really tough game too, right? Because now you know that Gavin did not bring the Azumarill in turn one. He didn't even bother locking on to Ice Spinner with that Choice Band. If you're Shreyas, you have to now be careful of, okay, I brought my Indeedee in the back. I was able to swap it in to maybe stop any sort of priority move, but the Iron Hands didn't even come for Gavin, so it's not like you have a Fake Out to stop. You weren't able to stop any Sucker Punches because your Indeedee got put to sleep pretty much immediately. So I think at this point, Shreyas needs to find a way to maybe just, he needs to find a way to allow for his Pokemon to do damage. Indeedee is Terra Grass, so if you switch your Terastallization onto Indeedee and maybe allow for a Follow Me and try and take some damage away possibly from your other teammates without getting put to sleep, that could be a really nice option. Or even the Armarouge, because Armarouge is your big hitter if you're Shreyas and you are not able to hit anything when you're asleep.
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of there's one of two options here, where I think probably that duo needs to get in the field faster, particularly the Indeedee, where most of the Pokemon on Shreyas' side, one of the starter Pokemon types for their Terastallizations, which is nice here in the sense that the Fire types are immune to Burn and the Grass types are immune to Spore, but Indeedee's kind of the one Pokemon who can help both ways, right? He can potentially become immune to Spore, redirect the Burns away. I think status effects were a huge problem in the first game for Shreyas, right? Where he ended up kind of burning through his Pokemon's health, but I think even if that had been a slower, longer game, I just don't know how he avoids all right, well, my physical attackers are burned, everything else is asleep, so I can't move forward. I think he's got to adjust the strategy to be able to handle it a little bit better this time.
Iron Hands Flutter Mane here for Shreyas, whereas Gavin is bringing the Mimikyu and the Brute Bonnet out here. No Pelipper lead this game, but I could see it in the back.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what's so difficult about this matchup for Shreyas, right? Is like, well, what does he have? Because, he could very feasibly have anything in the back, and I think all of them are pretty troublesome. Volcarona probably gets the least likely of the 6, but I mean, either two of the other 3 in the back really changes the way Shreyas would need to play this game. But at least, he starts out in a little bit more of a beneficial position. The Mimikyu is a little scary, does have the disguise up this time, lost it immediately last time. And once again, we just see the easy protect from Gavin, avoiding any fake out potential shenanigans.
Yeah, fake out, only able to go into that brute bonnet, is targeting that turn. No turn to go for a wild charge instead, like maybe they wanted to last time. Dazzling Gleam will at least break the disguise on the Mimikyu, which may allow for some big damage moving forward. The Mimikyu itself, it's not actually carrying Shadow Sneak, it's carrying Shadow Claw. So you don't have to worry about maybe switching in your own Indeedee, but Shadow Claw into the Fluttermane, it's holding a Focus Sash, it easily gets brought right down to that. So this Fluttermane is going to need to make some big moves into that Mimikyu if it wants to hang on.
Yeah, though speaking of that Indeedee, now we're in an interesting spot where, in most games, like, oh, well, I just have I have check on this Fluttermane where I can just sucker punch it. It's maybe not so simple here. Gavin doesn't know whether or not the Indeedee's in the back. We did see it as one of the back Pokemon last time. I guess we now, as the audience, know that it is not there. But will Gavin make that call, or will he play this more conservatively? He really doesn't want to take another Dazzling Gleam, which would be reasonably devastating. I assume not a knockout on either Pokemon, but a ton of damage to both of them. And Shreyas switching out here, so it won't matter too much what Gavin picked from the threat of betting most of the HP of the Pokemon on the field.
Yeah, Kingambit is actually that new switch up here for Shreyas, so not having that Indeedee whatsoever. Gavin going for a Terrestrialization this turn onto that Brute Bonnet, turning it into the Poison type, and not wanting to take that super effective damage from a Drain Punch on the opposite side of the field. I think it's a really neat Terra typing that you've seen. You and I spoke a little bit about it, how it is almost like seeing a old school Amoonguss, but new school anyway. Iron Hand's getting taunted this turn. It is holding a Assault Vest, so that's not really going to matter too much, but probably predicting a switch in here. Seed Bomb into that Kingambit, not doing a ton of damage. Drain Punch into the Brute Bonnet, also not doing a lot of damage, so really kind of slower turn 2.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty excellent move on Gavin's side, where he doesn't overcommit anything really. He does have to use the Terrestrialization. I always kind of love the joke. I like to imagine, Brute Bonnet saw the modern Amoonguss, like, oh no, this is what type I'm supposed to be. Terrestrialization is cleaning that right up, just like Amoonguss now. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be in a similar situation as the previous game, right? Where we're now in a spot where Gavin is threatening a bunch of nasty status effects to Shreyas' side of the field, and I just don't know how he's going to pick up a knockout here without eating at least one. Perhaps Terrestrialization will be part of the answer.
Yeah, Terrestrialization here onto that Kingambit. Kingambit, it is that Terra Fire, and that means that you could still put a lot of things to sleep here on Shreyas' side of the field. However, there is still a lot of options, right? This Kingambit itself, it is going to get taunted this turn, not going to be able to go for something like some big damage. Instead, Brute Bonnet goes for the Spore onto that Iron Hands. Iron Hands now going to get put to sleep. Iron Hands, at least at this point, now going to start dealing with the same problems that Shreyas' Pokemon were dealing with last turn, and that first turn of sleep does actually happen now. Kowtow's Cleave from the Kingambit into that Mimikyu, super effective damage. It is still, neutral damage there, but it still is not enough to knock out.
Yeah, I mean, with Mimikyu, sometimes everything looks like super effective damage, but not quite enough to pick up the knockout. I do think Kingambit is an interesting switch-up in terms of dealing with those status effects, where Kingambit, in addition to the Indeedee option, actually, is the other Pokemon on Shreyas' team who can potentially be immune to both the status effects. As a Fire-type Pokemon now, it can't be burned, and has the safety goggles to avoid the Spore.
Yeah, Shadow Claw into that Iron Hands does not do a whole lot of damage here. Seed Bomb also double targeting into that Iron Hands is not even enough to bring it down to under half. Iron Hands stays asleep for this turn. Looks like it's most likely just going to be another Kowtow Cleave to finish off that, actually into the Brute Bonnet this turn. Not able to finish off the Mimikyu. Will bring this Brute Bonnet down to start eating its berry. Gain a little bit of HP back. It doesn't have access to Regenerator, even no matter what its Terrestrialization might say.
Yeah, I mean, it's doing its best cosplay, but there's some things that only the modern Amoonguss can do. I actually kind of really like not picking up that knockout on the Mimikyu yet. With neither of these Pokemon really being that concerned about the Shadow Claw damage or the threat of a burn, why not just get some more damage down? Instead, we're going to see a relatively low-cost switch here as Amoonguss comes in without really being threatened by anything on the other side.
Yeah, Mimikyu Shadow Claw into that Amoonguss really does not do a whole lot of damage here. Shreyas doing a great job of slowing this game down. Seed Bomb does even less than that. Kowtow Cleave from this Kingambit into the Brute Bonnet. Once again, doing a good chunk. You're just starting to tick this damage down turn by turn.
Yeah, I love this. So not only does Amoonguss get in scot-free, and it can get right back out with the Regenerator and heal up this health if it needs to, but I think the King Gambit's a very important Pokemon for Shreyas to try to take this game, and now there's the option to, like, well, you can Pollen Puff King Gambit, and you're not really concerned about any damage coming from the other side if you want, so you can kind of take a free knockout here on either Pokemon if you'd like to. Make sure you keep that King Gambit healthy. I think he's going to have to trade very effectively with it to win this game, especially because it's still a tricky spot. He doesn't know Gavin's other Pokemon, so he has to play a little bit conservatively here. He can't really plan the full end game yet.
Brute Bonnet is going to switch out for Gavin at this point, going to be bringing in the Azumarill. So Azumarill can get super effective damage off. It could lock into Liquidation. Amoonguss also switching out, which I think is pretty good news for Gavin, so you're not dealing with something like a Follow Me. Flutter Mane does come in its place. 1 HP left here, may end up taking some damage, but no, Mimikyu just going to go for the taunt into that Flutter Mane.
Yeah, I mean, not the Pokemon perhaps he wanted to taunt. It kind of explains why Amoonguss switched out, but a nice defensive switch here, very little damage coming to Amoonguss, and at least you know now that you won't be seeing Protect from that slot, which could be a big deal here. This Azumarill, not only is it threatening a lot of damage as a Water-type Pokemon facing down a Fire-type Pokemon and a Flutter Mane who's even at full health is threatened by everything, but Aqua Jet here would be a huge problem because of that. We do see the Flutter Mane getting right back off the field.
Yeah, Amoonguss is able to switch in here at this point. Mimikyu also going to switch out. Lots of positional gameplay from both of these trainers in Game 2. Pelipper coming out here is going to set up the rain, boost the power of either an Aqua Jet or a Liquidation, depending on what you choose to run. Also putting out a lot of pressure. We saw that Hurricane was a one-hit knockout in that last game. Protect from the King Gambit. You get to at least test to see what is locked on here. Aqua Jet, though, targets into the Amoonguss this turn. Does do a little bit of damage, definitely boosted by that rain.
Yeah, I mean, the Aqua Jet is a big deal. This is still not a great spot for Shreyas to be in, but at least with it being Aqua Jet instead of Liquidation, Gavin's moves are kind of in the wrong order now, where if Amoonguss were to use that Rage Powder, it's probably going down, but, it would take both an Aqua Jet and a Hurricane instead of, just being knocked out by Hurricane and leaving King Gambit exposed to Liquidation instead. But I think Gavin's done a good job here, where, he's sort of struggling to get anything really done early in the game, but picking up a knockout in King Gambit, if it's given to him, I think is definitely worth it.
Huge with that Aqua Jet, does get that knockout into King Gambit. That is what Gavin needed there just to get that damage. That Pokemon was just being so troublesome. Is at least now at this point getting the Terrestrialization off the field. Hurricane into that Amoonguss this turn, enough for that knockout as well. Gavin now has to face down a 1 HP Flutter Mane in the back, and then also has to deal with that Iron Hands.
Yeah, this is a very difficult spot now. Normally the Iron Hands at least be threatening a Fake Out, but it's really tough to use that move while you are asleep.
I guess so, yeah. That makes a lot of sense there, Scott. Flutter Mane is able to come out, though, but when you're running Aqua Jet, you're faster than the Flutter Mane anyway, right? So you can get that last bit of HP. You can also, if you're the Pelipper, you've got a lot of opportunity to just click a pretty comfortable Hurricane here. Azumarill, though, is going to switch out. This does feel pretty safe. I do definitely understand this. It doesn't want to take some big damage. Brute Bonnet can come in, can go for something like a Sucker Punch maybe if need be. If it really wants to, Pelipper is just going to protect this turn as well, just to try and time out something maybe like a Wake Up here from that Iron Hands, who could possibly go for something like a Fake Out. Looks like it went into that Brute Bonnet. Brute Bonnet pretty happy to take that since it's not going to do much here. Is going to also get knocked out by that Moonblast.
Yeah, Gavin looking pretty clever there. Iron Hands proving me wrong there. It's like, well, actually, I can use it while I'm asleep. I'll just wake up.
Yeah, hey, Scott, I heard you.
Yeah, unfortunately, missing the target a little bit there, where that would have been a knocked out Azumarill, I assume, pretty cleanly. I guess maybe not, but regardless, it's a lot of health that you'd much prefer to have in this Azumarill versus, a Brute Bonnet that's kind of already done its job. Pelipper, I guess kind of whiffing the Protect there, but doing a nice safe move. Having both these Pokemon out at the same time now puts them in a really nice spot, and we do see the Aqua Jet connecting for another huge knockout.
Yeah, Flutter Mane now off of the field. If you get a Hurricane off into that Iron Hands, it'll be neutral damage, but should still do a lot here. If it's enough to knock out, it's still not even close, actually, and Rock Slide into both of these Pokemon. Not enough to bring that Pelipper down to its focus sash. It will be a 2-hit knockout, but it is not enough onto the Azumarill.
Yeah, and we do see Shreyas locking the forfeit here. A really impressive victory by Gavin. And I think a well-played series by both players, right? Gavin looking pretty dominant there, but I think it was a much stronger Game 2 from Shreyas. Definitely made Gavin sweat at least a little bit early in the game, but just a really good job by Gavin to kind of get in that